first thing to do is measure out the water. And that's 255, that's fine, for the sake of argument. And in this case it's 109 grams of caustic soda, because otherwise it'll make it, it's downwind too. If you're downwind of it, it'll make you cough. You have to work fairly quickly. It's hygroscopic, which means it absorbs water. If it absorbs water, it gives you a wrong reading. It actually becomes heavier than it really is. I think it might be something to do with the breeze. Then, as quickly as possible, you add that. Always add the sodium hydroxide to the water rather than the other way around. Always. Because otherwise you get a volcano. And with something as toxic or caustic as sodium hydroxide, you really don't want a volcano of it. So in just a second, whilst I start to mix this with my silicone spatula, it'll start to sort of gas off a bit. And I'm going to put it some distance away from me so it can just float away on the breeze without choking anybody. And then I let it cool. The next thing is the oil. I love these scales. They've been around for a while, as you can tell by the decrepit nature of them, but they still work really well. They're painter's scales. Now I'm going to weigh out 850 grams of olive oil. I'm going in grams, although litres probably would be just as easy, but of course oil is lighter than water, so there would be a different number of mils to grams. It does take a little while with one of these. These are great if you're going to do fairly large quantities. I love these 4-litre cans of olive oil. And in fact, whilst people might be keen to have extra virgin and all that sort of stuff, pumice olive oil is like the last pressing. So in fact, for food it would be the lowest quality, but in fact apparently for soap it's the highest quality, or rather it's the best thing to make soap with. I'm actually not entirely sure why. So I just found a little interloper in there, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And this then gets warmed up, so I'm going to take that and warm it up. Whilst the olive oil's warming up, I'm going to measure the next ingredient, which is green clay. 15 grams in this case of green clay. Okay. It's actually a bit over 15 grams, but in this case I think that's probably fine. What I want to do is sift it. There are a few bits, so it's a natural product. It does have impurities. The last measurement I need to make in this fairly simple recipe is for the essential oil. As you can see, I've done quite large quantities of soap and so on, so I buy litre bottles of lavender oil. And in this case I want 30. Okay. I add it to the, I'm adding it to the clay, and it'll just sit there for a little while. That'll be fine. The reason I add the clay is to fix the essential oil. Essential oils by their nature are volatile, and as a consequence they sort of disappear out of the soap over time. So anything that will prevent that, or help prevent it even a little bit, is a great thing. And also the clay's nice to colour it. It is a bit gritty, the clay. All the better to wash it with. So now we're waiting for the sodium hydroxide mixture or lye to cool down, the olive oil to heat up just a little bit, and we'll be ready to go in just a moment. Okay, this has been left, well, it's winter, so this has been left for, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, and it has cooled sufficiently. I'm adding it to the warmed oil. Carefully, by the way, you don't want any splashing going on. And at this stage you just have the sodium hydroxide and water in there and the oil. Now I'm mixing with a stick blender. Let's see how this goes. So this has been just a few seconds. This has been going now. It's now just one, not quite homogeneous, but it is just a creamy, sort of looks a bit like thin custard. And so I'll continue to stick blend it until it's thicker, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, this has now been stirred for a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, and it's a little bit thicker. So this is still thicker yet. This is 3 minutes later, 3 minutes since I started blending it, and it's definitely showing signs of you know, coming to the right, to trace it's called. And this is yet another minute or so later, and you can see that it's actually starting. I would say it's probably at very thin trace now. And trace is the point at which saponification is really starting. Saponification being the chemical process that makes soap. And if you can see that, I don't know whether you can see that, but you can actually just see in the shadow there where it is showing the trace of the soap as I drip it onto the main part of the soap. I don't know whether you can see that. And that will continue to thicken as time goes on. So I'll continue to zap it for another minute or so. Okay, so that is, I would say that was trace. As I drip the stuff on there, you can actually see the marks left there. It's sort of jelly-like, much thicker and jelly-like, and it's leaving marks as I drip it on. This is the point at which we add any of the other ingredients that we have, like botanicals such as I sometimes put orange peel in and so on, or spices, or I also use turmeric sometimes. So this is the point at which we do that, and included in that is the essential oil and the clay. So this is the point at which I do that. And once I add the essential oil and the clay, it's quite quick. It becomes, it gets thicker. The trace becomes thicker very quickly. So it's a bit of a race against time sometimes to actually get that. And that does vary according to the essential oil I'm adding. Lavender's quite nice to work with, though it doesn't do anything peculiar usually. So there I'm adding that, and there it is in there. I could just stir it, but I like things to happen quite quickly, so I usually give it a bit of a zap with the stick blender. If I give it too much of a zap with the stick blender, though, it becomes too thick to manage, and I want it to remain fairly liquid for me to put it into the mould. And in this case I'm not putting it into any, you know, fancy mould with shapes or anything. I'm just putting it into a basic, just a basic sort of squarish Tupperware type container, and I'm putting it in the oven. There we go, that will do for now. And I just make sure it's all mixed. Just one more time. The stuff around the edges, or you'll get uneven colouring, which some people like, the swirly effect, but I'm not going for that today. So And there we go, just throwing it into the mould. When I want to put lavender buds on it, so when I've cooked it and it's actually soap but still soft and quite wet, I'm going to put the lavender buds on it then. I don't think that, I haven't done it before. I haven't cooked with them, so I suspect that if I were to do that, they might discolour, because they do have a tendency to go brown in the presence of raw soap. But I do want them, so I want them to stay purple, and I want them to stay a nice shape as well, and scented, of course. So there it is. There's the soap. It's in the mould and it's ready to go in the oven.